The air in the warehouse clung to my skin like a damp shroud, heavy with the scent of cardboard and machine oil, a suffocating reminder that I was utterly alone. My boots scuffed against the concrete floor, each step swallowed by the cavernous expanse of the shipping facility where I worked the graveyard shift. Most nights, the solitude was a strange kind of comfort, a world where I could lose myself in the rhythm of counting boxes, scanning labels, and ticking off inventory lists. But tonight, something felt wrong, like a splinter lodged deep in my mind, whispering that the darkness was not as empty as it seemed. My job was straightforward. Ensure every shipment was accounted for, every item tracked through the labyrinth of shelves that stretched into the shadows. Usually I worked alone, though. Occasionally a coworker would share the shift, their presence a fleeting anchor in the endless night. Tonight, however, it was just me. I arrived at the warehouse under a moonless sky, checked in with my manager, and watched as he locked the front gate behind him, leaving me with nothing but the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of a far-off truck. I began my routine, moving through the aisles, my clipboard in hand, the familiar monotony lulling me into a false sense of security. An hour into my shift, I passed by a door at the back of the building, one reserved for truckers delivering goods. It was slightly ajar, the edge protruding just enough to catch my eye. My breath hitched. The door wasn't supposed to be open, not at this hour, not when I was the only one here. I approached cautiously, my fingers grazing the cold metal handle. Pulling it open, I peered into the parking lot, beyond a desolate expanse of cracked asphalt, bathed in the faint glow of a single street lamp. Nothing moved. No sound broke the stillness, except the faint rustle of wind through the trees lining the lot. I convinced myself my manager had simply forgotten to lock it, a careless oversight, nothing more. I didn't have a key to secure it, so I pushed it closed, the latch clicking softly, and turned back to my work, trying to ignore the unease curling in my gut. But the door lingered in my mind, a nagging question mark. I moved faster through the aisles, my pen scratching against the clipboard, the numbers blurring as my thoughts drifted. The warehouse felt larger tonight, its shadows deeper, the lights dimmer at the edges of my vision. As I turned into the next aisle, something flickered at the far end of the hallway, a blur of motion, like a figure darting across the opening. My head snapped up, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty, a long stretch of concrete flanked by towering shelves. I stood, frozen, my breath shallow, straining to hear anything beyond the faint buzz of the lights. Nothing, just my imagination. I told myself a trick of tired eyes and an overactive mind. I rubbed my face, the roughness of my palms grounding me, and forced myself to keep working. Yet the feeling wouldn't leave. It was as if the air had thickened, pressing against my skin, carrying the weight of unseen eyes. I tried to focus, counting boxes, but my gaze kept drifting to the hallway. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching longer than the last, until I couldn't stand it anymore. I set down my clipboard and walked toward the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. This section of the warehouse was unfamiliar, a storage area for prepped pallets awaiting shipment, a place I rarely ventured. Most of the lights were off, casting the room in a patchwork of shadow and dim fluorescence. I stood at the threshold, peering into the darkness, my pulse a steady drum in my ears. Nothing moved. No sound broke the stillness. I turned to leave, chastising myself for letting paranoia slow me down. But then, exhaustion hit me like a wave, sudden and overwhelming. My limbs felt heavy, my eyelids drooping as I returned to my work. I wanted to finish this aisle before taking a break to prove to myself I wasn't unraveling. I picked up my clipboard, forcing my eyes to focus on the numbers, but the shadows seemed to pulse at the edges of my vision. And then, there it was, again, a flicker of movement, this time unmistakable. A figure lean and swift, leaning out from the corner of the hallway, watching me. My eyes darted toward it, but the space was empty, the shadows mocking my fear. My heart slammed against my ribs, a cold sweat prickling my skin. This wasn't my imagination. Something or someone was here. I dropped my clipboard. The clatter swallowed by the vastness of the warehouse, and hurried toward the hallway, my boots pounding against the floor. The darkness seemed to thicken as I approached the air, growing colder, heavier. I stopped at the edge of the storage room, my voice trembling as I called out, "Hello?" The word hung in the air, unanswered, my own echo, the only response. I stepped further into the room, each movement deliberate, my eyes scanning the shelves, the pallets, the pools of shadow that seemed to shift just beyond my sight. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint creak of the building settling. Or was it something else? I froze, my breath catching as a bone-deep certainty washed over me. I was being watched. The feeling was visceral, a primal instinct screaming that I wasn't alone. My skin crawled, every nerve alight with the urge to run. I backed away, my eyes locked on the darkness, half expecting a figure to emerge from the shadows. I reached the hallway, my hand grazing the wall for balance, and glanced back one last time. The room seemed to pulse, the darkness alive with unseen menace. I turned to flee, my steps quickening when a deafening thud shattered the silence, a metallic clang like something heavy striking the shelves. I stumbled, my heart lurching as the sound reverberated through the warehouse, followed by a chilling pause. Then another thud, softer this time, deliberate, like a rhythmic tapping, meant to draw me back. They were trying to lure me. The realization hit me like a punch, cold and absolute. This was no accident, no trick of the mind. Someone was in here with me, hiding in the dark, playing a sick game. Panic surged through me, drowning out reason. I sprinted toward the back door, my breath ragged, the tapping growing fainter, but no less terrifying. I burst into the parking lot, the cold night air slapping my face, and stumbled to a stop, fumbling for my phone. My hands shook as I dialed 911, my voice barely coherent as I explained what had happened. I didn't expect much, maybe a patrol car in an hour, a cursory check of the building. But the police arrived swiftly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they entered the warehouse. What they found chilled me to my core. Hidden behind one of the pallets in the storage room was a man disheveled and wild-eyed in his 40s. His clothes were tattered, his face gaunt, a manic glint in his eyes that made my stomach churn. The officers dragged him out. His wrists cuffed his gaze, locking onto mine for a fleeting moment, a look that burned itself into my memory. Later, they showed me the security footage. For the past week, this man had circled the warehouse at night, testing every door, his silhouette a ghost on the grainy screen. Each time I had been inside. Alone sometimes, mere feet away, separated only by a flimsy lock. The thought of him out there watching, waiting, sent a shiver down my spine that hasn't left me since. They never figured out what he wanted. The police speculated he was homeless, maybe looking for shelter. But the way he hid, the way he tapped the shelves, felt too deliberate, too predatory. I quit the job soon after, unable to face those endless aisles, the shadows that seemed to breathe. Even now, in the safety of my home, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, somewhere, waiting for another door to be left ajar, another night to slip into the dark. I remember a story my grandfather told me years ago about a hunter lost in the woods. He'd felt eyes on him, a presence he couldn't see, following him through the trees. He said it wasn't the wolves or bears that scared him. It was the silence, the way it seemed to watch. That night, in the warehouse, I understood what he meant. The silence wasn't empty. It was alive, and it had a name I'll never know. The clock on the wall flickered its second hand, stuttering like a heartbeat caught in a chokehold. Midnight in my parents' laundromat wasn't just a time, it was a world of its own, where the hum of ancient machines drowned out the night and left me alone with my thoughts. But that night, something else was watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. I was a college sophomore, barely 20, juggling textbooks and late-night shifts at the family's 24/7 laundromat on the edge of town. The place was a relic, its chipped linoleum floors and rusted washers older than me. My parents had bought it cheap, a side hustle to keep us afloat, and I'd taken the Friday overnight shift, 10 Hauds p.m. to 6 Hausu a.m., to prove I could pull my weight. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and the solitude suited me. Most nights, I'd sit behind the counter, scrolling through my phone, the rhythmic thrum of the machines lulling me into a trance. But that night, the air felt heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. The laundromat wasn't much to look at. A long, narrow room with 2 rows of washers and dryers, their steel bodies dented and scratched. A flickering fluorescent light cast shadows that danced across the walls. And the back room, where we stored supplies, was a maze of cardboard boxes and cleaning chemicals. The front entrance had glass doors smudged with fingerprints, offering a clear view of the empty parking lot and the dark street beyond. It was a place where time seemed to stagnate, where the world outside ceased to exist. And yet, that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was creeping closer, its eyes fixed on me. Around 11:30 p.m., the last customer left a tired woman with a basket of kids' clothes who barely glanced at me as she shuffled out. I locked the door behind her, a habit born of caution, and settled back at the counter. My phone glowed with notifications, but my mind wandered to a memory from childhood, a story my dad used to tell about a night he worked here alone. He'd heard footsteps in the back room, slow and deliberate, but found nothing when he checked. Old buildings play tricks, he'd said, laughing it off. But his eyes never laughed when he told that story. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the hum of the machines, their vibrations pulsing through the floor. Then he walked in, and the world tilted. Just past midnight, the glass doors swung open, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, his frame swallowed by a black hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face. His hands were buried in his pockets, and he carried no laundry, no bag, no basket, nothing. My greeting caught in my throat as he ignored me, his head turning slowly to scan the room. His movements were deliberate, like a predator sizing up its territory. I forced a smile, my voice thin. "Hey, need help with anything?" He didn't answer, didn't even look at me. Instead, He drifted down the aisle of washers, his boots scuffing the floor, pausing to peer at each machine as if searching for something or someone. My pulse quickened, but I told myself I was overreacting. People came in at odd hours, sometimes looking for lost socks or forgotten quarters. Still, I kept my eyes on him, my thumb hovering over my phone's emergency dial. He reached the end of the aisle, lingered for a moment, then turned and walked back toward the entrance. As he passed the counter, I caught a glimpse of his face, or rather the shadow where his face should have been. The hood obscured his features, but I felt his gaze cold and piercing, like a needle sliding under my skin. He pushed through the doors and disappeared into the night, crossing the street. Without a backward glance, I exhaled, my shoulders sagging. But the unease lingered. Why had he come in? What was he looking for? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he'd dropped a shirt earlier and came to check. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. Something about him felt wrong, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot. I stood needing to move and started my cleaning tasks. Wiping down the counters, I replayed the encounter, my mind spinning scenarios. Each swipe of the rag felt like an attempt to scrub away the dread pooling in my chest. 20 minutes later, I was sweeping near the entrance when I glanced up and froze. He was back, standing just outside the glass doors, motionless, his silhouette framed by the darkness. The street light cast a sickly glow, illuminating the hoodie, but not his face. He wasn't moving, wasn't knocking, just staring. My heart slammed against my ribs, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. How long had he been there? Had he ever left? Or had he been circling the building, watching me through the windows? I stepped back, my broom clattering to the floor, and he shifted his head, tilting as if studying my reaction. Then, as suddenly as he'd appeared, he turned and walked away, vanishing around the corner of the building. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced myself to the door, pressing my face against the glass to look down the storefront. The parking lot was empty, the street silent. I wanted to call my dad, to hear his voice tell me I was being paranoid, but pride stopped me. I was supposed to be reliable, capable. Waking him at 1:00 a.m. over a suspicious guy felt like admitting defeat. Instead, I returned to the counter, my eyes darting to the windows every few seconds. The machines hummed on, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. An hour passed, maybe more. The adrenaline faded, leaving me drained, my focus slipping As I scrolled through my phone, I told myself he was gone, that he'd been a drifter, passing through, nothing more. But the memory of his shadowed face gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't dislodge. I didn't see him, but he saw me. Every move, every moment. I was about to start another cleaning round when a faint sound cut through the hum of the machines. A soft shuffle, like fabric brushing against wood, coming from the back room. I froze my phone, slipping from my hand. The back room was off limits to customers, a cluttered space with a single exit door leading to an alley. I strained to listen, my breath shallow. Another sound, something heavy shifting like a box being moved. My mind raced. Had I locked the back door? I always checked. But tonight, with that man distracting me, had I forgotten? I stood, my legs trembling, and edged toward the back, each step a battle against the voice screaming at me to run. At the doorway, I hesitated, peering into the dimness. The fluorescent light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the stacks of boxes. Nothing moved, but the air felt thick, charged with a presence I couldn't see. "Hello," I called, my voice cracking. Silence answered, but it wasn't empty. It was the silence of someone holding their breath, waiting. I stepped inside, my hand fumbling for the light switch, when I heard it again, a deliberate scrape, closer now, from behind a pile of boxes near the exit door. Panic surged, but I forced myself to move, inching toward the exit. If I could check the door lock, I'd be safe. My fingers brushed the handle, gold and slick. When I saw it, a length of rope, crudely knotted, looped around the outside handle. My stomach dropped. Someone had tied it, not to lock the door shut, but to make it harder to open from inside. He'd been here, planning this, trapping me, like an animal in a cage. I spun around, my eyes darting to the shadows, and there he was. The man in the hoodie, his back to me, crouched over a box, rifling through it, with slow, deliberate movements. His hood was still up, his body tense, as if he knew I was there, but wasn't ready to acknowledge me. My breath hitched, and in that moment, he froze, his head tilting slightly, like a wolf catching a scent. Time slowed, the world narrowing to the space between us. I didn't think I ran. My feet pounded the floor, my body lunging for the exit door. He moved, a blur of black fabric, but I reached the handle first, yanking it with all my strength. The rope resisted the knots, digging into the metal, but adrenaline surged, and the door gave way. I stumbled into the alley, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. Behind me, the door swung open again, and I heard his footsteps, heavy, purposeful, chasing me into the dark. I sprinted across the parking lot, my heart thundering, not daring to look back. My phone was still inside, but I didn't care. I needed distance, safety, anything but the suffocating terror of that man's presence. I reached the street, my lungs burning, and risked a glance over my shoulder. He stood at the edge of the alley, motionless, his hooded figure blending into the shadows. He didn't chase me further, didn't call out, just watched his silence, more terrifying than any scream. I kept running until I reached a gas station a block away, its neon lights a beacon in the night. The clerk, an older man with tired eyes, let me use his phone to call my dad. As I waited, trembling, I replayed the night in my mind, each moment sharper, more vivid. The way he'd walked through the laundromat, studying it like a hunter mapping his trap. The rope on the door hastily tied but deliberate, his shadowed face never fully revealed. What had he wanted? To rob me, to hurt me? Or something worse, something I couldn't fathom? My dad arrived with the police, their flashing lights cutting through the darkness. They searched the laundromat, but the man was gone. The back room empty, except for a few overturned boxes. The rope was still there, a crude reminder of how close I'd come to being trapped. The cops took my statement, their faces skeptical, but professional. They found no fingerprints, no evidence beyond my word and the rope. My dad hugged me, his arms shaking, and drove me home, promising I'd never work alone again. That night haunts me, a scar I can't erase. I see him in every shadow, every stranger who lingers too long. I'm hypervigilant now, checking doors twice, scanning faces for that hooded silhouette. I don't trust anyone to be harmless. Not anymore. If he'd tied that back door shut, if I hadn't noticed him in time, I wouldn't be here. The laundromat still stands, its machines humming through the night, but I'll never step inside again. Some places hold memories too dark to reclaim. Okay? The air in the office hung heavy like a shroud of dust no one dared to disturb. I sat alone at my desk, the 5th floor, swallowed by a silence so deep it seemed to pulse. My fingers danced across the keyboard, inputting endless rows of data, but my eyes kept darting to the shadows beyond my cubicle. Something felt wrong tonight, a prickling unease that crawled up my spine and settled in my chest. I couldn't shake the thought. What if I wasn't as alone as I believed? My name is redacted, and I was a data entry clerk at a private company tucked away in a suburban office park just outside the city. The job wasn't glamorous. Low pay, long hours, and managers who piled on tasks far beyond my job description. But I was young, barely 22, and this was my first real gig. I didn't complain. I just did what was asked, even when it meant staying late, like tonight. The building, a towering 5-story structure of glass and concrete, felt like a labyrinth after hours. By 6:00 p.m., the other floors, home to service-based businesses, emptied out, leaving me as the sole occupant of the 5th floor. Or so I thought. The evening started like any other. My boss had dumped a stack of paperwork on my desk just before leaving. His voice clipped as he assumed I'd stay late to finish. "You're good for it, right?" he'd said, not waiting for an answer. I nodded, too timid to push back. The extra money helped, and honestly, I preferred the quiet of an empty office to the constant scrutiny of daytime micromanagement. By 6:30, the main lights in the building dimmed, replaced by faint energy-saving bulbs that cast long, wavering shadows across the cubicles. I settled in the soft hum of my computer, the only sound keeping me company. 3 hours passed in a blur of spreadsheets and coffee sips. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, and a dull ache throbbed in my temples. I was nearly done, just an hour's worth of work left before I could head home. But then, a sound shattered the silence. It was faint, muffled, like a door easing open somewhere far below. I froze my hands, hovering over the keyboard. The building was old, prone to creaks and groans. But this was different, deliberate, almost cautious. I strained to listen, my heart thudding in my ears, but the silence returned thicker now, as if the building itself held its breath. "You're imagining things," I told myself, shaking my head. "Old buildings make noises. It's nothing." But the unease lingered, a cold weight in my gut. I forced my eyes back to the screen, typing faster, willing the work to end so I could leave. Minutes ticked by 30, maybe 45, when I decided I needed a break. My mouth was dry, and the office Keurig by the entrance promised a quick jolt of caffeine. I stood, stretching my cramped legs, and walked toward the coffee station, my sneakers silent on the carpet. That's when I noticed it. The door to the hallway was ajar, not wide open, just a sliver enough to reveal a strip of darkness beyond. My breath caught. That door led to a utility closet and a staircase to the lower floors. It was always closed. Nobody used it. I'd walked past it a dozen times tonight and hadn't noticed it open. Had it been like this all along? Or had someone... No, stop it, I chided myself. Maybe the latch was loose. Maybe I'd bumped it earlier and didn't realize. Still, curiosity tugged at me. I stepped closer, my pulse quickening, and peered into the hallway. The dim lighting made the space feel like a tunnel, the walls pressing in. The staircase door and utility closet were both shut undisturbed. But the air felt colder, here heavier, like it carried a presence I couldn't see. A chill ran through me, and I backed away, pulling the hallway door closed behind me. Just finish the work and go home. I thought my voice, a silent command in my head. Back at my desk, I tried to focus, but the unease had taken root. Every few minutes, I glanced up, expecting to see something. A shadow, a movement in the corners of the room. The cubicles stretched out like a maze, their partitions blocking my view of the far walls. The silence was oppressive now, broken only by the faint hum of the computer. "You're fine. Just keep working." But the words felt hollow, a mantra losing its power. Then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a dimming, just pure, suffocating darkness. The computer screen's pale glow was the only light casting my face in a ghostly white. My heart lurched, hammering against my ribs. I stood my chair rolling back and turned toward the light switches across the room. The darkness seemed to pulse alive with possibility. I took a step, then stopped. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming from the far side of the office. 1, 2, 3. Each one closer, echoing in the void. My breath hitched my body, frozen. The sound was unmistakable. Someone was walking toward me, hidden just beyond the screen's faint light. I stared into the black, my eyes straining, but saw nothing. The footsteps paused, and the silence that followed was worse, a void filled with dread. "Run!" The word exploded in my mind, shattering my paralysis. I bolted for the staircase door, my sneakers pounding the carpet. The hallway loomed ahead, a tunnel of shadows, but I didn't care. I reached the door, yanked it open, and stumbled into the stairwell, where emergency lights cast a sickly yellow glow. I didn't stop, taking the steps 2 at a time, my breath ragged, until I burst through the first floor exit into the cold night air. I stood in the parking lot, gasping, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained what had happened. The operator's calm questions grounded me, but my eyes kept darting to the building's dark windows, half expecting to see a face staring back. It took 15 minutes for a police officer to arrive, followed by 2 more. They searched the building, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but found no one. 2 days later, the security footage revealed the truth. The building's cameras, grainy and outdated, showed a man entering around 2:00 p.m., claiming an appointment with another company. He'd slipped into the utility closet and stayed there unnoticed until everyone left except me. He'd wandered the building, pausing when he realized I was still there. The footage was too blurry to identify him, but the thought of him watching me waiting in the dark made my skin crawl. I quit the next day. The job wasn't worth it. Not the money, not the overtime, nothing. I couldn't face that building again, couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there somewhere watching. What if he comes back? The question haunts me, a shadow that lingers in every quiet moment. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I know one thing: I'll never feel safe alone again. The forest swallowed our voices, its ancient trees standing like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches weaving a canopy that blocked out the stars. Ethan and I had trekked deep into the wilderness of Maine, our boots crunching through the underbrush, our packs heavy with gear for a weekend escape. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a primal perfume that promised solitude. But as we set up camp in a clearing, the woods seemed to exhale a subtle shift that made my skin prickle. Something was out there, beyond the reach of our campfire's glow, and it was watching. Ethan, my childhood friend, was no stranger to the outdoors, but this was his first time at this secluded spot. I'd been here before, countless times, navigating the winding trails with a confidence born of familiarity. The clearing we chose was perfect, a flat expanse ringed by towering pines, far from the chatter of civilization. We arrived around dusk, the sky bruising purple, and set to work pitching our tents. The fire we built crackled with life, its warmth pushing back the chill as we cooked dinner and cracked open a few beers. Ethan's laughter echoed through the trees, his stories of city life a stark contrast to the stillness around us. For a while, the forest felt like a friend, its silence a canvas for our memories. But 2 hours into the night, the mood shifted. A rustle, faint but deliberate, came from the darkness just beyond the firelight. Ethan froze mid-sentence, his eyes darting to the tree line. I followed his gaze, my heart quickening, but saw nothing, just an endless void where the light faded. We sat in silence, straining to hear the fire's glow, suddenly frail against the encroaching night. The sound didn't return, and Ethan shrugged, chalking it up to a squirrel or a deer. I nodded, forcing a smile, but the unease lingered a cold weight in my chest. We doused the fire and retreated to our tents, the forest's silence now a heavy blanket. As I drifted to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that the rustle hadn't been an animal at all. Morning broke with a golden haze, the forest reborn in sunlight. The tension of the previous night seemed absurd, a fleeting paranoia banished by the day. Nearby, a half-mile through the woods, lay a hidden pond, a secret oasis with a miniature waterfall and a crystal-clear stream. It was the reason I loved this spot, a place untouched by hikers, its beauty ours alone. We spent hours there, swimming and lounging on the rocks, the water's chill, a sharp contrast to the summer heat. Ethan was in his element, his grin wide as he splashed me, the forest's embrace, a balm for our souls. By noon, we hiked back to camp, sated and sleepy. I took a nap in my tent, the drone of insects lulling me into a dreamless rest. As evening approached, the sun dipped low, painting the trees in hues of amber and crimson. We hadn't gathered firewood, having burned through our supply the night before. I set out to collect dry branches, the forest floor, a mosaic of twigs and leaves. Ethan, ever the wanderer, announced he'd explore the nearby trails, promising to grab any sticks he found. I waved him off, accustomed to his need for solitude. He'd always been like this on our trips, slipping away to commune with nature, returning with a quiet contentment. I gathered a pile of wood and sat by the unlit fire pit, waiting for him to return. The forest, growing darker with each passing minute. But Ethan didn't come back. The sun sank lower, its light bleeding away, and a knot of worry tightened in my gut. He was experienced, knew better than to wander too far at dusk. We carried satellite messengers, small devices for emergencies, our only link in a place where cell phones were useless. I reached for mine, intending to check in, when I saw a message from Ethan, sent just minutes ago. Got kinda lost. Back at the pond. Relief washed over me, tinged with irritation. I typed back, "Stay there. I'm coming." Knowing the area, I grabbed my pack and headlamp and set off the trail to the pond etched in my memory. It was a race against the fading light, the forest's paths treacherous in the dark. Halfway there, my messenger buzzed again. I stopped fumbling to check it, expecting an update. But the words on the screen froze my blood. "I see you." My breath caught, a chill snaking down my spine. I wasn't near the pond yet. How could Ethan see me? I scanned the trees, their shadows twisting in the dim light, but saw no one. Confusion gave way to unease. I typed, "I'm not there yet. Where are you?" No response. My pulse quickened, and I broke into a jog, the forest closing in around me. The pond came into view, its surface a mirror, reflecting the last slivers of daylight. I called Ethan's name, my voice echoing unanswered. The tree line was empty, no sign of him anywhere. Panic clawed at me. I checked the messenger, my last message unread. Where was he? The forest grew quieter, the birdsong fading, the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. I shouted again, the sound swallowed by the trees. Maybe he'd headed back somehow, finding his way. With night falling, I knew I had to return to camp before the darkness made it impossible. I retraced my steps, the trail now a maze of shadows. Ethan's message. I see you looping in my mind, a sinister riddle. The words felt wrong, not like Ethan at all. My headlamp flickered its beam, weak against the encroaching night. As I neared the clearing, a faint orange glow pierced the darkness. The campfire was lit. My heart lifted. Ethan must have made it back. I quickened my pace, relief flooding me. But as I broke through the trees, the figure by the fire turned. It wasn't Ethan. The man's silhouette was wrong, taller, leaner, his posture unnatural. He stared in my direction, his face obscured by shadow, then bolted into the woods, his footsteps fading into the night. My breath came in gasps, terror rooting me to the spot. Who was he? Why was he here? I fumbled for my messenger, sending frantic texts to Ethan, my hands trembling. The fire's glow cast eerie shadows. The clearing, no longer a sanctuary, but a trap. A rustle broke the silence, and I spun my headlamp, catching a glimpse of movement. Ethan stumbled into the clearing, his face pale eyes wide with fear and relief. "We have to go," he said, his voice shaking. I nodded, mentioning the man by the fire. Ethan's expression darkened. "That's him," he whispered. "I saw him by the pond. I thought it was you at first, but..." He recounted his story, his words tumbling out. Lost near the pond, he'd seen a figure approaching, assuming it was me. But as the man drew closer, Ethan saw his face, a smile that wasn't human, too wide, too still, like a mask carved from wax. Ethan had asked for directions, but the man said nothing, just kept walking, his eyes unblinking. Panic had sent Ethan running, lost again, until he saw the fire's glow and headed toward it. We packed in a frenzy, dousing the fire. Our movements hurried the forest's silence, now a predator waiting to strike. The hike back to the car was a nightmare. Every snap of a twig, a signal of pursuit. We didn't speak our breaths loud in the darkness, our headlamps barely piercing the void. The man's smile haunted me, a grotesque image burned into my mind. When we reached the car, we threw our gear inside and sped away, the forest shrinking in the rearview mirror. Neither of us spoke until we hit the highway, the weight of what happened settling like dust. Days later, we pieced it together. The rustle on the first night, the fire lit by someone else. Ethan's message, I see you, that he swore he never sent. Had the man tampered with our devices? Had he been there all along, watching, waiting for us to separate? The thought of him lurking outside our tents, his presence, invisible as we slept, sent a shiver through me. We haven't returned to those woods, and we never will. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I feel it again, that weight of unseen eyes, and I wonder if he's still out there smiling. Years ago, my uncle told me about a hunter he'd met in these same woods, a man who claimed the forest had a memory, that it kept the things you left behind, your fears, your mistakes. He said some things never leave, they just wait. That night, I left something in those trees, and I pray it never finds me again. The road stretched endlessly before me, swallowed by a forest that seemed to breathe with secrets. I'd driven 6 hours to escape the city's noise, seeking silence in a stranger's cabin. But as the trees closed in their branches, clawing at the sky, I felt it, a warning, whispered in the wind. This place didn't want me here. I was 27, burned out from work, and craving a reset. An Airbnb listing caught my eye, a cheap cabin in a small town tucked away in a forest, far from the urban sprawl. The photos showed a quaint wooden structure surrounded by pines, promising solitude. I didn't care about the town itself. I planned to hole up with books and wine, letting the world fade away. I booked it impulsively, packed a bag, and hit the road. The city's lights dimming in my rearview mirror. The drive was long the last 2 hours, winding through empty roads, flanked by towering trees. My GPS flickered, struggling to keep signal, and by the time I reached the cabin, dusk was settling. It was smaller than the photos suggested, its weathered wood blending into the forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the silence was absolute. No birds, no rustling leaves, just a void that pressed against my eardrums. I unlocked the creaky front door, my footsteps echoing in the sparse interior. A living room with a sagging couch, a tiny kitchen, and a bedroom barely big enough for the bed. It felt lived in, not in a cozy way, but as if someone had just left their presence lingering in the air. I needed supplies, so I drove into town, a 15-minute trip through more forested roads. The town was a ghost of itself, its main street lined with faded storefronts and a single grocery store. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a sickly pallor over the aisles. The few people I passed, an old man stacking cans, a woman at the register, watched me with unblinking eyes. Their gazes weren't curious. They were cold, almost hostile, as if I'd trespassed on sacred ground. They know I don't belong here. I thought my skin prickling. I grabbed essentials, bread pasta, a bottle of red, and hurried out their stairs, boring into my back. Back at the cabin, I shook off the unease. "You're just paranoid," I told myself, unpacking groceries and pouring a glass of wine. The first night passed quietly. The forest outside, a dark canvas beyond the windows. I watched TV, the signal grainy, and fell asleep on the couch, lulled by the hum of the old heater. The next day was peaceful, reading, napping, losing myself in the stillness I'd craved. But that night, everything changed. A storm rolled in unannounced, like a predator stalking its prey. The sky darkened, clouds churning, and rain began to fall, soft at first, then torrential, hammering the cabin's roof. Thunder rumbled in the distance, each peal closer than the last. I was on the couch, half dozing, when it happened, a single, deliberate tap at the front door. My eyes snapped open, my heart lurching. The sound was unmistakable, not the wind or a branch, but a human hand testing the wood. I sat frozen, the TV's muted glow casting my shadow on the wall. No one could be out there, not in this storm. I waited, breath held, but the tapping didn't come again. My mind raced. Maybe the Airbnb host checking in. But I'd had no messages, no calls. The cabin was miles from the nearest neighbor, the road barely passable in this downpour. I grabbed my phone, its screen dim in the flickering light, and crept to the door. The porch was unlit, the darkness beyond the glass impenetrable. I pressed my face close, squinting, but saw nothing. Just rain lashing the ground, turning the earth to mud. I backed away, my pulse hammering, and returned to the couch, telling myself it was nothing. You're alone out here. It's just the storm playing tricks. An hour crawled by the storm, growing fiercer, wind howling through the trees. I tried to focus on the TV, its static-laced sitcom, a weak distraction, but my eyes kept darting to the windows. The cabin felt smaller, its walls closing in the rain, a relentless drumbeat. Then, from behind me, a sound cut through the noise, a sharp, muffled rasp, like someone trying to stifle a cough. It came from the window, at the back of the living room, just feet from where I sat. My body went cold, every nerve screaming. I turned slowly, dreading what I'd see, and caught a fleeting movement, a shape darting away from the glass, swallowed by the dark. He was out there, watching me. The realization hit like a physical blow. I scrambled to my feet, my wine glass tipping over red, pooling on the floor like blood. The window was bare now, rain streaking the glass, but I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. Someone was circling the cabin, their eyes fixed on me through the storm. My hands shook as I dialed 911, whispering my address to the dispatcher, my voice barely steady. "I think someone's stalking me," I said, my eyes locked on the window. "They're outside right now." The wait was agony, each minute stretching into eternity. The storm drowned out any sounds from outside, leaving me blind to his movements. I clutched my phone, its battery icon blinking red, and paced the living room, avoiding the windows. What did he want? Why me? My mind flashed to the townsfolk, their cold stares, their unspoken warning. Had they sent him? Was this their way of driving me out? A memory surfaced, unbidden, a story my college roommate once told about a town that shunned outsiders, marking them for something unspeakable. I'd laughed it off then, but now it felt too real. Headlights pierced the darkness, and relief flooded me as a police cruiser pulled up. I opened the door, rain soaking my clothes, and spilled my story to the officer, a middle-aged man with a bored expression. He listened, his eyes scanning the cabin, but his response chilled me. "That's it," he said, as if I'd reported a missing cat. He stepped onto the porch, shining his flashlight into the trees, but found nothing. "No one's out there in this mess," he said, his tone edged with irritation. "Call if something actually happens." Before I could protest, he was gone, his taillights vanishing into the storm. I locked the door, my hands trembling, his dismissal a slap in the face. He didn't believe me, didn't care. The cabin felt like a trap now, its isolation a weapon turned against me. I rushed to the bedroom, yanking clothes from drawers, determined to leave. I'd drive through the storm, sleep in my car, anything to escape this place. As I stuffed my backpack, the tapping returned heavier, insistent, shaking the front door in its frame. He was back, and he wasn't leaving. I froze, my breath shallow, as the tapping grew louder, a demand for entry. I crept to the bedroom window, peering through the blinds, and saw the police cruiser was gone. This was him, the man from the window, come to finish whatever he'd started. My heart pounded, a caged animal, desperate for escape. I grabbed my keys, my backpack, and moved to the front door, ready to make a run for my car. But as I reached for the handle, I glanced back and saw it. A shadow at the living room window, motionless, watching me. Panic surged, and I threw open the door, bolting into the storm. Rain blinded me, mud sucking at my shoes, but I didn't stop. My car was 20 feet away, its outline blurred by the downpour. I fumbled with the keys, my hands slick, and risked a look back. The cabin's door hung open, a black maw in the night, but no one followed. Or did they? The forest was alive with shadows, each tree a potential hiding place. I slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and turned the ignition. The engine roaring to life. I peeled out of the driveway, wipers slashing at the rain, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. The road was a river, branches littering the pavement, but I didn't care. I drove blindly, my heart racing, the cabin shrinking in my rearview mirror. Was he behind me, running through the trees, his eyes locked on my taillights? I didn't know, didn't want to know. I kept driving through the town past its darkened shops and silent streets until the forest gave way to open road. I didn't stop until dawn, pulling into a rest area hours away, my body trembling with exhaustion. That night never leaves me. I see the cabin in my dreams, its windows like eyes watching. I hear the tapping, feel his gaze through the glass. The police found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. But I know he was there. I wonder if the townsfolk knew if they sent him to scare me off, or worse. Was I just a stranger to them, or something more, a sacrifice to their secrets? I'll never go back. Never trust a place that feels too quiet. Some silences hide monsters, and I escaped one by the thinnest thread. The house loomed at the end of the dirt road, its sagging roof and peeling paint glowing faintly under the dusk sky. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white as a knot of unease twisted in my gut. Josh had been my friend for years, but his voice on the phone last night, distant, almost hollow, hadn't sounded like him. Why had he called me out of the blue, insisting I visit? The invitation felt urgent, almost desperate. And now, as I stared at the isolated house, I wondered if I'd made a mistake coming here. My name is redacted, and Josh and I had been close since our senior year of college, a bond forged over late-night gaming sessions and shared dreams of escaping small-town life. After graduation, I'd moved 3 hours away for a job, while Josh stayed behind, buying a cheap, run-down house with his girlfriend. We kept in touch, texts, calls, online games, but it had been over a year since we'd seen each other in person. His call on Thursday out of nowhere caught me off guard. My girlfriend's gone for the weekend. He'd said, his voice sluggish, like he'd just woken up. Come hang out. It'll be like old times. I didn't have plans, and the thought of reconnecting pushed aside the odd tone in his voice. I packed a bag, grabbed some drinks, and hit the road. The drive was long, cutting through endless stretches of empty fields and wooded back roads. By the time I pulled into Josh's driveway at 4:30 p.m., the sun was sinking, casting the house in a muted golden haze. The place looked worse than I'd imagined. Windows smudged with grime, a porch littered with dead leaves, and a stillness that felt unnatural, like the air itself was holding its breath. I knocked on the door, waited, then knocked again. 5 minutes passed before Josh finally opened it, his face pale and shadowed, his eyes sunken, like he hadn't slept in days. "Hey, come in," he mumbled, stepping aside. The Josh I knew was all energy, quick smiles, loud laughs. But this version of him moved like a ghost, his voice barely above a whisper. Inside the house smelled of stale air and something sharper, like burnt coffee, left too long on the stove. The living room was sparse, with a sagging couch, a small TV, and an Xbox hooked up to a cracked screen. We sat down, cracked open some drinks, and started playing games, but the vibe was off. Josh barely spoke, his responses short and distracted. His hands fumbled with the controller, missing buttons he used to hit with precision. I tried to fill the silence, talking about old college stories, but his eyes stayed fixed on the screen, glassy and distant. Is he okay? I wondered, my unease growing. I chalked it up to a bad day, maybe work stress or a fight with his girlfriend. Just give him time, I told myself. As the night wore on, I noticed more details that didn't sit right. The house was too quiet. No hum of a fridge, no ticking clock, just our voices and the low drone of the game. The walls were bare, no photos or decorations, like no one really lived here. Josh's girlfriend had always been the one to add warmth to their spaces, but there was no trace of her, not a single feminine touch. I asked how she was doing, and Josh's face tightened. "She's fine. Just away for a bit," he said, his voice flat. The lie hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. I didn't press, but the knot in my stomach tightened. By 10:00 p.m., I was exhausted, my eyes burning from the screen's glare. Josh looked worse, his face almost gray, his movements sluggish. "Maybe we should call it a night," I suggested, hoping sleep would reset whatever was wrong. But Josh shook his head, his voice suddenly sharp. "No, let's stay up. It's early." His insistence felt forced, almost frantic, like he was stalling. I pushed back, saying we'd have all day tomorrow. But he grew more adamant, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't place. Anger, fear. Just a little longer, he pressed, leaning forward. The air between us grew thick, the silence uncomfortable. We sat there sipping drinks, barely talking, the game's repetitive music looping in the background. It felt like I was sitting with a stranger, not my friend. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm heading to bed," I said, standing. Josh tried to argue, but I waved him off, my worry now tinged with irritation. He led me to the spare bedroom, a small, windowless space with nothing but a bed against the wall. The mattress looked brand new, still wrapped in plastic, as if it had been bought just for me. Why is this room so empty? The thought gnawed at me, but I was too tired to dwell on it. I closed the door, locked it, and sat on the bed, pulling out my phone. Something about Josh's behavior, the lies, the exhaustion, the pushiness, felt wrong. I needed answers. I texted his girlfriend, someone I'd met a few times in college. "Hey, Josh is acting weird. Has he been okay lately?" Her reply came almost instantly, and my heart sank as I read it. "We broke up 4 months ago. I moved out. Why are you with him?" My hands trembled. Josh had lied about her being away. And why invite me here now, after months of silence? The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. I stood pacing, my mind racing. What's going on? I needed to talk to him, to demand the truth. As I reached for the doorknob, a shadow moved under the door. My breath caught. It was faint, but unmistakable. Someone was standing just outside, silent and still. My heart pounded, my hand frozen on the knob. The shadow shifted, then vanished, followed by the soft creak of floorboards down the hall. "Josh," I whispered to myself, but the word felt wrong. I cracked the door open, peering into the dark hallway. The house was pitch black now, all lights off. I stepped out, my phone's flashlight cutting a thin beam through the gloom. Josh's bedroom door was open, and I heard faint rustling inside, like someone moving carefully. I crept closer, my pulse thundering in my ears. That's when I saw it. A metal mount screwed into the back of the spare bedroom door, fresh and gleaming, like it had just been installed. My stomach dropped. Had Josh done this while I was texting? Was he planning to lock me in? I turned toward the living room, my flashlight sweeping the space, and froze. On the kitchen counter sat an open package for a deadbolt, the kind you can only unlock from one side. He's trying to trap me. The realization hit like a punch, my breath shallow and ragged. Footsteps came from behind, fast, heavy. I spun around my flashlight, catching Josh's face in the dark. His eyes were wide, lifeless, the same tired expression, now twisted into something colder. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, my voice shaking. He didn't answer, just stared, his body tense, like he was about to lunge. Run! The word burned in my mind, and I bolted for the front door. Josh called my name, his voice low and eerie. But I didn't stop. I fumbled with the lock, my hands slick with sweat, and yanked the door open. Cold night air hit my face as I sprinted to my car keys, shaking in my hand. I didn't look back until I was inside, engine roaring, tires screeching as I peeled out of the driveway. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying every moment the lie about his girlfriend, the empty house, the deadbolt. By the time I got home, Josh had blocked me on everything. Phone, social media, all gone. I didn't call the police. What could I say? Nothing had happened. Not really. But the truth was worse. I'd known Josh for 3 years, shared countless nights laughing and gaming, and yet in that house, I didn't recognize him. Who was he? The question haunted me, a shadow that followed me home. I'd escaped, but the fear lingered. What had he planned? And why me? My phone buzzed at 2 a.m., its shrill vibration slicing through the silence of my new apartment, a sound that felt like a warning from the void. I jolted awake, heart pounding the darkness of my bedroom, pressing against me like a living thing. The screen glowed with my mom's name, an anomaly at this hour. I answered, my voice thick with sleep, and her words came in a rush, frantic and trembling. A man had come to their house an hour ago, banging on the door, demanding to see me by my full name. He claimed my boyfriend was worried because I hadn't come home. But I live alone with no boyfriend and haven't for months. The chill that settled in my bones wasn't from the cold. It was the realization that someone out there knew me, knew my past, and was hunting for me in the dead of night. I'd moved into this apartment just a month ago, a small space in a quiet urban neighborhood, still cluttered with unpacked boxes. My parents' house, 20 minutes away, had been my mailing address my whole life, a safe anchor in a world of change. That night, as I sat on my bed, the phone pressed to my ear. My mom recounted the incident. My stepdad had heard the pounding at 1 a.m., a relentless assault on their front door, accompanied by the doorbell's insistent chime. He'd crept downstairs, cautious, leaving the glass storm door locked as he faced the stranger outside. The man wore a black hoodie, its hood drawn tight, obscuring his face in shadow. He was in his 30s, my stepdad guessed, with no visible tattoos or scars, his features indistinct, except for a faint accent that might have been Hispanic. "I'm sorry to bother you," The man had said, his voice calm but insistent. "But I'm looking for my full name." My stepdad, wary, feigned ignorance. "Who?" he asked, his hand tightening on the doorknob. The man repeated my name, each syllable deliberate, and added that my boyfriend was frantic, searching for me, because I hadn't returned home. My mom, watching from a window, saw the man's silhouette shift, his posture unyielding. My stepdad pressed him, asking who this boyfriend was. The man's answer sent a shiver through my parents, and now through me. He named a boy I'd dated in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago, a name so uniquely Italian, I'd never heard its like since. He repeated it, as if to ensure my stepdad understood his tone, laced with a strange urgency. "They're worried about her. Is she here? I don't have a boyfriend. I live with my 3 dogs, their soft snores a constant comfort in my solitary life. I haven't been in a relationship in 6 months, and my high school romance was a distant memory, buried under decades of life. How did this stranger know that name? Why would he weave it into a lie so specific, so personal?" My stepdad, unnerved, shut the door and locked it, his heart racing. But the man didn't leave. For 10 agonizing minutes, he lingered on the porch, lighting a cigarette, its ember a glowing eye in the dark. He paced, phone pressed to his ear, his voice too low to catch. My parents watched frozen until they called the police. 5 minutes before the cops arrived, the man walked to the dead-end street, slipped into a silver car, and vanished. My stepdad couldn't catch the license plate. As my mom relayed this, my apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in. I clutched my phone, my dog stirring at my unease. How did he know my name? My past. The questions spiraled, each one sharper than the last. I hadn't spoken to that high school boyfriend in over a decade, our paths diverging after graduation. The specificity of the lie, the name, the story was what terrified me most. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, a message meant to unsettle, to show me someone had peeled back the layers of my life. I barely slept that night, my eyes darting to the windows, half expecting to see a hooded figure staring back. The next day, I messaged my old boyfriend on Facebook, a desperate attempt to find answers. I laid out the story, my words clumsy with fear. His response was swift, his confusion mirroring mine. He had no idea who the man could be, no connection to anyone who'd seek me out. He'd moved on, built a life far from our teenage romance. The conversation left me more lost than before, the mystery deepening like a wound. I filed a police report, but with no license plate, no clear description. It felt futile. The days that followed were a haze of paranoia. I checked my locks obsessively, avoided dark streets, and kept my dogs close, their presence a fragile shield against the unknown. A year passed, the incident fading to a dull ache, though never fully gone. I'd settled into my apartment, the boxes unpacked my life, regaining a semblance of normalcy. But then at a family gathering, my stepsister and her fiancé dropped a bombshell that dragged me back into the nightmare. They'd been at a house party in January, mingling with strangers, when a young woman began talking about her recent breakup. Her ex, she said, was a wreck, a man with a name that stopped my stepsister cold, the same unique Italian name my high school boyfriend. It wasn't a huge coincidence. We'd all gone to the same high school, shared mutual friends. But what came next was they shared my story, careful with details, watching the woman's reaction. Her face drained of color, her eyes wide with terror. She admitted that a few nights prior, she'd been woken at 1 a.m. by someone pounding on her door, the force so violent she thought it would splinter. Her Ring camera captured a man in a black hoodie, his face hidden, hammering relentlessly. She'd stayed silent, lights off, heart pounding, until he finally left. She hadn't called the police, too shaken, but fled to a friend's house the next day. The similarities were uncanny, the hour, the hoodie, the aggression. But one detail stood out. She'd just broken up with our shared ex. She was certain the man at her door wasn't him. He was taller, heavier, a stranger. I sat at the family table, my fork frozen in midair, as my stepsister recounted this. The room spun, the chatter fading to a dull roar. Who was this man? Why was he targeting women connected to my old boyfriend? The questions gnawed at me, each one a thread in a tapestry of fear. Was it a vendetta, a twisted game, or something darker? The police had no leads. The mystery, a cold case. I changed my routines, moved my mail to a P.O. box, installed cameras at my apartment. But the fear lingered, a shadow that followed me home. My grandmother once told me about a neighbor who vanished in the night, her door left ajar, a single cigarette butt on the porch. She said, some people don't just disappear. They're taken piece by piece, starting with their secrets. That man at my parents' door took something from me that night, my sense of safety, my trust in the world. And somewhere out there, he's still holding it, waiting for the next door to knock. The darkness in our house wasn't just the absence of light. It was alive, watching, waiting for me to notice it. I was 17, alone, in a place I'd called home my entire life. But that night, it felt like a stranger's domain. And somewhere in its shadows, something was hiding its presence, marked by the frantic eyes of my sister's dog. It was a Friday night in our small town, the kind where summer hung heavy in the air, even after sunset. My family was scattered. Mom, Dad, and my younger brother at our cabin a few miles away, chasing a weekend of fishing and campfires. My sister, 21, was pulling a late shift at the diner, leaving me to hold down the fort. I didn't mind being alone. Our house, a creaky 2-story built before my parents were born, was my sanctuary. Its quirks, the uneven stairs, the drafty windows were as familiar as my own heartbeat. And with Bosco, my sister's scruffy mutt, padding around, I felt secure. He was a nervous dog, always alert, his ears perked at the slightest sound. If trouble came, he'd let me know. I was in the basement. My bedroom, a fortress of posters and clutter sprawled on my bed, with headphones blasting music. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the AC and Bosco's occasional pacing upstairs. Around 11:30 p.m., I paused my playlist, craving a snack. The basement was cool, its concrete walls muffling the world above. But as I climbed the stairs, a strange unease settled in my chest. Something felt off, like the air had thickened, carrying a weight I couldn't name. I shook it off, blaming the late hour, and headed to the kitchen. Bosco was by the glass sliding door. In the living room, his body tense, staring into the alley beyond. Our house backed onto a narrow path, a shortcut kids used during the day, but at night, it was a ribbon of darkness. I flipped on the porch light, expecting to see a stray cat or a raccoon, but the alley was empty, its shadows undisturbed. "Relax, buddy," I said, ruffling Bosco's fur. He didn't budge his eyes, locked on the glass, a low rumble in his throat. I frowned, peering out, but saw nothing. "He's just jumpy," I told myself, grabbing a bag of chips and heading back downstairs. Then he erupted, his frenzy shattering the silence. Just before midnight, Bosco's sharp, insistent barks tore through the house, each one a spike of alarm. I yanked off my headphones, my heart lurching, and bolted upstairs. He was at the glass door. Hackles raised his body, a coiled spring. His eyes were wild, fixed on something I couldn't see, and his barks were relentless, a warning I'd never heard from him before. "Bosco, chill," I called, but he ignored me, his focus unbreakable. I approached the door, my pulse racing, and that's when I saw it. The glass was ajar, a 3-inch gap, letting the night air seep in. My stomach dropped. I'd let Bosco out earlier, around 9:00 p.m., and I was certain I'd locked the door. I always did. My anxiety about break-ins making me obsessive. Our town was quiet, but not immune to trouble. There'd been a string of strange incidents lately. Houses hit with nothing stolen, just doors left open, windows tampered with. Someone's testing locks, my dad had said, half joking. But this wasn't a joke. I reached for the handle, my hand trembling, and slid the door shut, twisting the lock with a satisfying click. I checked it twice, 3 times, my breath shallow. Had I forgotten to lock it? My mind rebelled against the thought. I wasn't careless not about this. I scanned the living room, its familiar shapes, now menacing in the dim light. The couch, the coffee table, the TV, all unchanged, but the air felt charged, like a storm about to break. Bosco had stopped barking, but stood rigid, his eyes still on the alley. I grabbed my phone, its flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, and checked the second floor. Closets under beds behind curtains. Nothing. The house was empty, but the unease clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. Back in the basement, I tried to calm down music low in my ears. Bosco stayed upstairs, his paws clicking on the hardwood, a restless sentinel. I told myself it was a mistake, a lapse in my routine, but doubt gnawed at me. What if someone had been here, testing the door, waiting for me to slip? A memory surfaced, unbidden. A story my brother told last summer about a neighbor who woke to find their back door open. Muddy footprints leading nowhere. Just kids, the cops had said. But the neighbor moved away a month later. I pushed the thought down, focusing on the music. But then I heard it, a faint thud, like a footfall, directly above my head. I froze, my heart hammering. The basement ceiling was the living room floor, and Bosco was up there, but this wasn't his light tread. It was heavier, deliberate, a single step followed by silence. I yanked out my earbuds, straining to listen. Nothing. Then another thud closer to the stairs. Bosco's claws scrambled, his low growl filtering down, and my blood ran cold. Someone was in the house, moving, watching. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet, its weight a small comfort, and crept to the basement door. My phone clutched in my other hand. The house was dark. The living room bathed in the faint glow of the porch light. Bosco stood by the glass door, his body low eyes fixed on the hallway leading to the kitchen. I followed his gaze, my flashlight beam trembling, and saw nothing but shadows. Bosco, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't move, his growl deepening a warning I couldn't ignore. I stepped forward, bat raised each creak of the floorboards, amplifying my fear. The kitchen was empty, its counters gleaming faintly, but the air felt wrong, like someone had just passed through. I checked the front door locked, the windows secure. But as I returned to the living room, Bosco's growl turned sharp, his head snapping toward the staircase. The second floor. I hadn't checked it thoroughly, assuming no one could get up there without me hearing. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to climb the bat, heavy in my hands. The upstairs hallway was pitch black. The doors to my parents' room, my brother's, and the bathroom all closed. I opened each one, my flashlight revealing empty spaces, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger, a pressure behind my eyes. Back downstairs, I sank onto the couch, my nerves frayed. Bosco stayed by the door, his vigilance unwavering. I texted my sister, asking when she'd be home, but got no reply. Her shift often ran late. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the house was settling. Maybe Bosco was spooked by a possum. But the open door, the footsteps, the way the air felt occupied, it didn't add up. Someone had been here, maybe still was. I scrolled through my phone, searching for local news about break-ins, and found more than I expected. Homes targeted, nothing taken, just a violation of safety. Why our house? Why tonight? Around 2:00 a.m., headlights swept across the windows, and relief flooded me as my sister's car pulled in. I opened the front door, Bosco bounding out to greet her, and she stepped inside, her face tired, but smiling. "Rough night?" she asked, ruffling my hair. I started to explain the door, the footsteps, Bosco's panic, but stopped when I saw her expression shift. She glanced at the glass door, her smile fading. "Wait," she said, her voice low. "You didn't open that door after I got home, did you?" My heart stopped. She told me that an hour after she'd returned, she'd found the glass door open again, not just ajar, but wide, the night air pouring in. We'd let Bosco out through the front door, not the back, and she'd locked it herself before heading to the bathroom. I stared at her, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Someone had been in the house, hiding, waiting. When I'd checked the second floor, they'd been there, silent, watching. And when my sister came home, they'd slipped out, leaving the door open in their haste. We sat in the kitchen, the lights blazing, piecing it together. Bosco had known his instincts sharper than mine, his barks a desperate alarm. The first open door wasn't my mistake. It was their entry, a test to see if I'd notice. They'd stayed moving through our house, their footsteps masked by the night, until my sister's arrival forced them to flee. How long had they been here? Inches from me, their breath mingling with the shadows. We called our parents, who promised to come home at dawn, and checked every lock, every window. Our hands shaking, the police came. The next day, their report clinical. No fingerprints, no evidence, just another incident in a town growing uneasy. They suggested better locks, a security system, but their words felt hollow. They didn't feel, it didn't know what it was like to lose your home to a stranger's presence. Bosco stayed close to me, his eyes searching the corners, as if he knew the danger hadn't passed. I haven't slept, right, since my dreams filled with footsteps, with doors swinging open to reveal nothing but darkness. They were here, and they could come back. Our house isn't a sanctuary anymore. It's a puzzle with a piece missing, a shadow that doesn't belong. The notification pinged on my phone, a soft glow in the dark of my bedroom. A new match on Tinder. His profile picture showed a sharp jawline, a confident smile, and eyes that seemed to hold a secret. I swiped right, my heart fluttering with the thrill of possibility. But as I stared at his name, Jake, something cold stirred in my chest. A whisper of instinct I couldn't name. I didn't know then that this match would pull me into a nightmare, one that would leave me checking every shadow, every locked door. My name is redacted, and I was 19, fresh out of a messy high school breakup that had left me wary of love but craving connection. Tinder seemed like a safe way to test the waters, a digital buffer between me and the real world. I lived alone in a small apartment near my college campus, a cozy space filled with thrift store furniture and string lights. My days were a blur of classes, coffee shop shifts, and late-night study sessions. But my nights were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that amplifies every stray thought. That's why I downloaded the app a few weeks ago, hoping for a spark, a distraction, anything to fill the void. Jake's profile stood out. 21, a business major with a bio that read like a checklist of charm, loves hiking coffee, and deep conversations. His messages came fast, witty, and attentive, making me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. We texted for days, then moved to Snapchat, where he sent selfies from campus, his smile warm against the backdrop of autumn leaves. "Let's meet up," he typed one night, and I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. My breakup had left scars. Trust didn't come easy, but Jake's easygoing vibe wore me down. What's the worst that could happen? I thought, ignoring the faint prickle of unease. Our first date was at a movie theater, a safe public place. Jake was taller than I'd expected, his presence commanding, but not overpowering. He bought my ticket, cracked jokes during the previews, and held my hand as the credits rolled. It felt normal, perfect even. This is what I've been missing. I thought my guard slipping. We grabbed coffee afterward, talking until the barista shooed us out at closing. By the end of the night, I was smitten, my doubts buried under the glow of his attention. "I want to see you again," he said, his voice soft but intense. I nodded, my cheeks warm already, imagining our next date. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Jake was everything I wanted. Thoughtful, funny, always texting to check in. We went on more dates, a hike in the nearby hills, dinner at a cozy diner, late-night drives with music blaring. He listened when I talked about my fears, my dreams, my past. His eyes locked on mine, like I was the only person in the world. After a month, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes, my heart racing. This is it, I thought. This is real. But then something shifted. It was subtle at first, a flicker of irritation when I didn't text back fast enough, a sharp edge to his tone when I canceled a date to study. I brushed it off as stress, but the cracks grew. One night, driving to dinner, Jake fell silent mid-conversation, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. The air in the car grew heavy, suffocating. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice small. He didn't answer, just stared at the road, his jaw clenched. I asked again, and he snapped, "Shut up." The words hit like a slap, sharp and raw. My breath caught, my body frozen. This isn't him, I told myself, but the look in his eyes, cold, almost vacant, said otherwise. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. At the parking garage, I found my voice. "We're done," I said, my hands trembling as I grabbed my bag. I walked away, my heart pounding, expecting him to follow, to apologize, but he didn't. I made it to a nearby coffee shop, my legs shaky, and called an Uber. The ride home was a blur, my phone buzzing with missed calls from Jake. I blocked him on Snapchat, Tinder, everything, my fingers moving on autopilot. It's over, I told myself, but the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. The next week was a haze of relief and regret. I confided in a friend, Sarah, who'd never met Jake, spilling the story over coffee. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice firm. I nodded, but the shame lingered. How had I fallen for him so fast? A few nights later, Sarah texted me a screenshot that made my blood run cold. It was an Instagram DM from Jake, sent to her account. Someone he shouldn't even know existed. "Hey, I'm sorry to reach out like this, but redacted is ignoring me. I need to talk to her." My hands shook as I read it. How did he find her? I hadn't shared her name, her profile. Nothing. I messaged my other friends, warning them about Jake, my paranoia growing. Soon my inbox filled with DMs from strange accounts. No profile pictures, no posts, just variations of the same plea. Talk to Jake. He's worried about you. I ignored them, my heart racing, but one night I cracked. It's over. Leave me alone. I typed to one account, then blocked it. The messages stopped, and for weeks, I thought it was done. He's gone, I told myself, trying to rebuild my routine, my sense of safety. Then, one morning, changed everything. I stepped outside to my car keys jingling in my hand and froze. Dangling from the driver's side handle was a necklace, the one I'd given Jake on our third date, a cheap silver chain with a small heart pendant. My breath hitched, my vision narrowing. He was here. My apartment was a half-hour drive from his place. Had he come in the dead of night, slipping through the shadows to leave this taunt? I scanned the parking lot, my pulse hammering, but it was empty, the early morning light casting long, eerie shadows. I yanked the necklace off my hands, trembling, and threw it into my bag, too shaken to think straight. I drove to work, my mind spiraling. Why the necklace? It wasn't valuable, just a token, but its presence felt like a violation, a reminder that Jake knew where I lived. I'd only let him pick me up once early in our relationship, but that was enough. At the boutique where I worked, I tried to focus folding clothes, greeting customers, but my nerves were raw. When the phone rang, I answered on reflex, my voice cheerful. Hello? Thanks for calling. The words died in my throat. It was Jake, his voice low and urgent, rambling about a sweatshirt he wanted back. I hung up, my hands shaking, the receiver slipping from my grip. How did he know I was working today? I'd never told him my schedule, not even when we were together. I called my sister, Emma, my voice breaking as I told her everything. The DMs, the necklace, the call. She was furious, protective, and messaged Jake herself, demanding he stop. Leave her alone, she wrote, even offering to return the sweatshirt to end it. Jake refused, insisting he needed to meet me in person. Emma threatened a restraining order, and he went silent. That was the last we heard from him, but the fear didn't fade. What if he's still watching? The thought clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. I changed my locks, parked my car in a different spot, and never walked alone at night. Jake had vanished, but he'd left something worse, a paranoia that seeped into every corner of my life. The screen glowed in the dark, a single line on Craigslist searing into my mind. Your mother is in Hawaii. Your birthday is my exact date. This is your big sister. I froze my finger, hovering over the mouse. The words a violation, a knife slicing through the safety of my new home. I'd just moved into this house in a sleepy small town, my Wi-Fi barely set up, my life still in boxes. But someone out there knew me, knew my Facebook profile picture from a trip to Hawaii, knew my birthday, and was taunting me with a cryptic message. The air in my living room turned cold, the silence heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. I wasn't alone anymore. I'm 5'3" petite, often mistaken for younger than my age. Just the other day, a neighbor knocked and asked if my mom was home, their smile polite but oblivious. I laughed it off, but the Craigslist post wasn't funny. It was personal, deliberate, like someone had peeled back the layers of my life and laid them bare. I'd been browsing the local missed connections section out of boredom, expecting quirky posts about fleeting glances. Not this, a digital dagger with my name on it. The big sister signature was the worst part. I don't have a sister. My pulse quickened as I checked my Wi-Fi settings. My heart sinking when I saw 2 unknown devices connected. I changed the password immediately, my hands shaking, but the question lingered. Had someone hacked into my world, or were they closer than I thought? It started a week earlier at the gym I'd joined after moving in. The place was small, filled with the hum of treadmills and the clank of weights, a haven to rebuild myself in this new town. I was on the elliptical, my earbuds blasting music, when I felt it a prickle on the back of my neck like a predator's gaze. I glanced up, and there he was, a man towering at least 6'4", built like a bodybuilder. His eyes locked on me. His face was sharp, almost hollow, with a stare that didn't blink, like a soldier who'd seen too much. He moved through the gym, his steps deliberate, always just close enough to keep me in sight. My gut screamed danger, but I pushed it down, telling myself I was overreacting. He passed by my machine, his gaze cutting through me, not casual, but calculated, as if he was memorizing every detail. My breath caught my legs, slowing on the pedals. I forced myself to focus on the music, but his presence was a shadow I couldn't shake. When I finished, I headed to the women's locker room, my heart pounding. I stayed there for 20 minutes, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, waiting to ensure he'd leave first. Peeking out, I saw no sign of him and made for the exit, my keys clutched like a weapon. But as I stepped into the parking lot, he appeared emerging from the men's locker room, his eyes finding me instantly. I froze my instincts, warring run or stand my ground. Stupidly, I chose defiance. I slowed my pace, meeting his stare with one of my own, my jaw set. He walked to his SUV, a hulking black vehicle, and I headed to my car. Our gazes locked, in a silent battle. Standing by my driver's door, I watched him slide into his seat. He lowered his head, and his eyes met mine again, a cold, unblinking stare that sent a shiver down my spine. It was almost comical, like a challenge in a bad movie. But there was nothing funny about the way his gaze seemed to strip me bare. I waited, refusing to move, until his SUV roared to life and peeled out of the lot. Only then did I get in my car, my hands trembling as I turned the key. I live in a small town, the kind where streets end in cul-de-sacs and neighbors know your business. As I drove home, the roads were quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows. But just before I turned into my neighborhood, headlights flared behind me, too close, too aggressive. My heart lurched. It was an SUV, black, like the one from the gym. I gripped the wheel, my mind racing. Had he followed me? I took a sharp turn, hoping to lose him, but the SUV stayed close, its presence a predator in my rearview mirror. When I pulled into my driveway, it sped past, disappearing into the night. I sat there, engine idling, scanning the street, but it was gone. I told myself it was a coincidence, but the knot in my stomach said otherwise. 3 days later, my husband left for work, leaving me alone with our 3 kids asleep in their rooms. I was upstairs, curled in bed, the house quiet, except for the hum of the AC. Then a sound, a soft click from downstairs. Unmistakable. The front door. My heart stopped, my body frozen as I strained to hear. Footsteps, faint but deliberate, moved through the living room. Someone was in my house. I crept out of bed, my bare feet cold against the floor, and checked on my kids. They were fast asleep, oblivious their soft breaths, a stark contrast to my pounding pulse. I edged to their window, peering out at the street. There, parked at an odd angle, was an old, unmarked car, its engine running headlights off. My stomach dropped. I stomped on the floor, a desperate attempt to scare the intruder, and waved frantically at the car. It peeled away tires, screeching, leaving the street empty. But the footsteps downstairs didn't stop. They quickened, moving toward the back of the house. I ran to the stairs, my phone clutched in one hand, ready to dial 911. As I reached the landing, a figure emerged from the shadows. Below a man, his face covered his build. Massive, unmistakable. It was him, the man from the gym. He moved fast, slipping out the back door before I could react. I checked the house, my laptop untouched on the counter. Nothing stolen. But the violation was worse than theft. He'd been in my home, my sanctuary. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained. They searched the house, found nothing, and chalked it up to a possible burglary gone wrong. But I knew better. This wasn't random. The Craigslist post, the gym, the SUV, the break-in, they were connected. My husband saw the same car a few weeks later, speeding off when he stepped outside. My brother-in-law, visiting, mentioned a man with a huge build lurking near our house, his description matching the stranger. Each incident was a piece of a puzzle I couldn't solve, a shadow growing larger with every passing day. I upgraded our security cameras. New locks, a stronger Wi-Fi password. But the fear lingered, a constant hum beneath my daily routine. Who was he? Had he hacked my Wi-Fi, seen my life through my devices? Was the big sister post a taunt, a warning, or something worse? I stopped going to the gym, avoided posting online, but the sense of being watched never left. Every creak of the house, every flicker of a street light felt like him waiting, watching. My father once told me about a man in our old neighborhood who'd leave notes on people's cars, random personal details, like what they ate for dinner. No one caught him, but the note stopped when he moved away. He said, "Some people don't want to hurt you. They just want you to know they're there." This man, this shadow, knew my birthday, my past, my home. And somewhere out there, he's still watching his eyes, hidden behind that bone-chilling stare.